Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at the press conference of the National Electoral Commission. With us here we have the head of the NEC, Judge Sylwester Marciniak, deputy head of the NEC, Judge Wojciech Sych, member of the NEC, Liwiusz Laska, member of the NEC, Maciej Miłosz, and head of the National Electoral Office and the secretary of the NEC, Minister Magdalena Pietrzak. Over to you, sir. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to reading the announcement to you, I would just like to say that there are several provisions from the Electoral Code worthy of mentioning right now. For instance, Article 313 in Chapter 5 concerning determining voting results and the results of the presidential election. Article 313 states that Regional Electoral Commission prepares the protocol and then forwards it to an upper level of the tier. Article 12 states that once protocols from all constituencies are received, aggregate voting results are determined and then they are sent to the National Electoral Commission, and the National Electoral Commission verifies all the results sent by regional electoral commissions. Let me remark that as of 8 a.m. today, we are still missing 5 protocols from district electoral commissions. Katowice, well, the protocol is basically in the system. Nowy Sącz, Olsztyn, Szczecin and Warsaw. We still need to have 5 approved protocols to be able to announce the final results. In accordance with Article 316, once all the protocols are verified, the National Electoral Commission will determine the voting results. So that's actually the current situation. Unfortunately, contrary to what the media was saying, we will not announce the final results right now. However, in line with Article 81, the National Electoral Commission may, once the voting is ended and before the results are announced, announce so-called partial unofficial voting results in the presidential election, determined based on protocols received electronically. And just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, apart from the so-called over 25,000 permanent constituencies, we had 2,000 of so-called separate constituencies. Naturally, once the voting ended, the first protocols to be received by the electronic systems are those prepared by commissions that had pretty few voters. So these are the separate constituencies like hospitals, remand centers. Moreover, we tend to first receive protocols from smaller municipalities. There's simply less work in order to determine the results. That's why if we were to present the results to you in an ongoing manner on our website, and actually I just learned a second ago that normally we have 20,000-30,000 displays of our website. We recently exceeded the threshold of 200,000, so that shows a huge interest in the results of voting. As I said, we have almost all protocols, but still that's 99.7 of the total number. Yet the number of constituencies is not correlated with the number of voters. The numbers of voters are not equal in all constituencies. That's by virtue of explanation. We have 9 protocols that were not sent to the system from abroad, from Brussels, 6 from London, and 2 from Manchester. It's hard to say when these protocols will be uploaded to the system, because the commissions are still working there. So we can't tell whether that will be noon or 4 p.m. Right now, the commissions are not able to determine that, and we are not able to tell you when the protocols will be received by us. Hence, we wanted to present to you the announcement of the 13th of July, data as of 7:58 a.m. Under Article 81 of the Electoral Code, we will now present to you partial unofficial results of the voting in the Polish presidential election, based on information on voting results from 27,222 constituencies out of the total number of 27,231. So there's still 9 missing, as I mentioned to you. That's 99.7% of the number of constituencies. Partial results and the numbers of votes per candidate. Andrzej Sebastian Duda, 10,413,094 votes. That is 51.21% of votes. Rafał Kazimierz Trzaskowski, 9,921,219 votes. That's 48.79%. Let me emphasize that the turnout, based on the data that we received from district electoral commissions, is 68.12%. I don't want to cause any bad emotions. That's why we decided to present to you partial unofficial results, knowing that there are still 9 protocols missing. We simply haven't received them, and I fear that I can't tell you when that will happen. Importantly, many voters voted in the UK and in Brussels in the postal voting mode, as this was the only mode available there. Still, this number will not meaningfully impact the results. Even if we look at the numbers in Manchester, we had 22,000 voters, a similar number in the other commission in Manchester, similarly in London. These numbers will not change the results as for determining the majority of votes. And that's it. Thank you very much, sir. Do you have any questions? Małgorzata Zranicka, TVN24. A couple of questions, actually. What is the NEC expecting? Are you getting any signals that there might be more voting, electoral protests? We had some signals about packages being delivered too late abroad. We know that over 40,000 packages were not returned after the first round. Yesterday we had many signals about incorrect stamping of the ballot papers. protests. Can we expect more electoral protests? Does the MFA have any guidelines related to that? From what I know, abroad an electoral protest has to be submitted in person. Are there any guidelines concerning that? Well, as for precise number of invalid votes, number of packages that were received abroad, right now we are not able to give you any data. This is still unofficial information. However, based on the protocols that we received from regional electoral commissions that have already been approved and that were analyzed, we concluded that the numbers were not so high as to be indicative of any trend. These were rather pro-miles and not percent. There were constituencies in which we had 10 invalid ballot papers. When it comes to invalid votes, perhaps voters came to the conclusion that they didn't like any of the candidates, and that's why they didn't put a cross, or they put 2 crosses, 2 X marks, which invalidates the vote. But still, we are not talking about more than 1% here. Globally, we, however, cannot give you any data now. As for packages that were delivered abroad, already after the first round of election, we noticed that the return rate was low, even though we sent out many more packages to voters than in 2015. Let me remind you that after the first round, the number of packages returned was higher than in 2015. We have no hard data for the time being to conclude that the return rate is higher or lower. I don't know whether we will be talking about 10,000 packages globally or 20,000. I don't think that there are any higher numbers, but it's just if and when. Right now, I have here the announcement that we read out to you after the first round of election, and as you recall, the number of return envelopes, 483,000, and the only item that actually impacted inclusion of these votes was the fact that there was no statement signed by the person, which was 17,000, and that invalidated the vote. Do you know how many voters did not find their names on the election rolls, even though they signed up for it via the internet? Well, for the time being, it's hard to say what the number was, what scale that is, and whether there were such situations at all. However, let me remind you that the turnout, even though we are in the middle of the holiday period, even though we have the pandemic, we are still much higher than in the first round. This is a record high turnout in presidential election in the 21st century, and it's very close to the second round of the presidential election in 1995. Will you have any guidelines for the MFA related to potential electoral protests abroad? You have 3 days for that, and you have to submit it in person, and the decisive factor is not the stamp on the envelope. We know that there were some issues, so protests may occur. Surely protests may always be submitted, and the charges presented in respective protests are still to be determined. The Supreme Court will decide about that, and the National Electoral Commission will present its opinion on that. so will the District Electoral Commission, the one that is the subject of the protest. Right now, I think it's still premature to talk about it. We have 48 hours, as you know, not 24, to wait for protocols from abroad under the Special Act, and once that period lapses, we will be able to tell you something more about the scale of protests. And what about the preparation of the voting day abroad? Yesterday afternoon, we knew what was happening in Split in Croatia. Crowds of people in a queue until late night, and even before that, it was obvious that there's a huge interest. 10 times more people registered to vote in that consulate. Perhaps it could have been done or prepared differently, better. Well, as for constituencies abroad, this is not only the decision of the Polish government, it has to be approved by local authorities, and one of, for instance, London constituencies had serious problems with the premises. The British government only gave us approval to organize it in our embassy, and the surface of the premises is limited. This was, of course, created before the first round, so we were able to add the constituency in Kuwait and United Arab Emirates. However, truth be told, if voters wish to vote in the postal voting mode, that's a big unknown. We don't know how many people will register for that mode. Hence, it's a difficult task for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The number of embassies and consulates is limited. The number of people working there is also limited. And suddenly it turns out that in the first round in Zagreb, there were 150 people, if I'm correct, in Split 300 people, and during a couple of days, we have 3,000 people. Of course, that will always cause problems, but some things cannot simply be foreseen. Madam, if I may, constituencies abroad were created until the 9th of June. Back then, it was not possible for them to predict what will happen. I assume that these were consuls who were submitting the requests to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Later on, it would be problematic to create additional constituencies. Just like my colleague said, if several commissions have to be located on the same premises, it's a huge problem. Not to mention the huge undertaking that our consulates are simply not braced for. Bear in mind, these employees normally don't deal with electoral law on everyday basis. It was a huge effort for them. We had to provide them with many instructions, sometimes on the go, and they had plenty of tasks. They had to prepare everything, packages, and they had to handle ongoing matters, send it, receive it, forward it to the Commission. In some cases, people from MFA from Poland flew in to support them so that it's done more quickly. It's a huge effort indeed. Aneta Oksiuda, Polish Press Agency, 3 questions to you. The first one, what if 48 hours is not enough for any of the commissions abroad? I don't want to name any specific commission. Will you wait for the protocol or not? Let me read out to you the provisions of the Act of the 2nd of June 2020. As I said, the Electoral Code gives us 24 hours. This is a time window to receive protocols from abroad, otherwise they are considered invalid. Article 26, however, of the said Act states that if the relevant district electoral code or regional electoral code does not receive the results from voting abroad within 48 hours after finish of the voting process abroad, voting in these constituencies is considered to be invalid. However, personally, I don't think that that'll be the case. I think that these 9 commissions will have sent us the protocols by that deadline. We have information from the MFA. We will get the protocol by the noon, but we are optimistic on the whole. Do you have any information about cases where people were not able to vote? And which commission was the last, which polling station was the last to close? Well, we are not ready for that question, actually. We can verify it in the system. The information is there. I understand that you're asking for the polling stations in the country. Well, we know that in Kołobrzeg, the works are still on the way. We will verify it and we will give you that information. What was your second question? Well, we haven't had any information about any voters being declined the right to vote. As we said, that's impossible. We all knew voters, members of the Commission were very much aware that if they come before 9, they will be let in. I think a split was the record beater, but we'll provide you information about the country. Even in Split, I said that it might be 6 hours. Unofficially, I know that it was around midnight, so only 3 hours. No, it was 1 a.m. The speaker corrects himself, so it was 4 hours of queuing. Bartosz Kwiatek, Polsat News, good morning. Sir, the missing protocols that you mentioned, based on which you provided us with partial unofficial results, we know that these are 9 constituencies from abroad. How does it correlate to the missing protocols from Poland? Katowice, Nowy Sącz, Olsztyn, Szczecin, Warsaw. As for the 5 localities that I mentioned, Katowice, Warsaw, Nowy Sącz, Olsztyn and Szczecin, these are protocols from regional electoral commissions. They are already in the system, but they are still being analyzed. As I mentioned, Article 314, 315 of the Electoral Code states that the NEC has to verify the correctness of all the calculations. Kamil Krupa, TV, to refer to my colleague's question, I understand that when it comes to the protocols from Poland, the information is in the system, and based on that information, you presented us with the partial results based on the information from abroad. It's not even available in digital form. Is that a correct understanding? Yes. However, let me draw your attention to the following fact. The difference between the candidates running for the presidential office is around 500,000 votes. 491,000. It was just, quick calculation. Therefore, my question, in the context of the 9 missing protocols, how many votes might that be? Manchester, as I mentioned, is 2 times 22,000 plus cent packages. We don't know what the return rate will be. London, that's around 13,000 times 6. We are still not talking about a number that might tip the balance. Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, Jacek Czarnecki, Radio Z, 9 protocols are only protocols from abroad. Yes, and the protocols from Olsztyn, Nowy Sącz, these are regional electoral commissions, not district electoral commissions, so there's nothing missing from major cities. No, we got it all, we got it all. I must say I was surprised that the protocols from Warsaw, Wilanów, Ursynów, in the past, we had some delay there. This time, the protocols were in the system really quickly. And what about Split? People had to queue until 1 a.m. They already sent the results? Yes. We were surprised ourselves that they were so quick to do that. In Split, it was done in person, so it's just about counting the ballot papers. In the UK, they really have a lot to do. Opening the envelopes, etc., etc., reading the statements, another envelope, so that's a huge effort. In Croatia, it was only possible to vote in person. And in the UK, it was only possible to vote in postal voting mode. That's a huge difference because, indeed, you have to verify 2 things, the personal statement and then the ballot paper. You have to take them out from 2 envelopes, so there are a lot of technicalities. But we hope that this will happen today. So the final solution will be there. Yes, that's what we would wish, but it's not up to us. If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you, and see you at the next conference.